Last week, I did a video on the extraordinary rise and fall of Hungarian football, who went from being the envy of the world in the early 1950s to a laughingstock, losing to amateurs and part-timers today. Lots of you asked for more non-list based videos, which, to be honest, I prefer doing anyway, and at the time, Roy Keane had just agreed to become Nottingham Forest assistant manager under Martin O'Neill. What's more, the response to Keane making our list of the 100 greatest footballers of all time back in November surprised me in terms of just how many people have no idea how good he really was. I think Roy Keane may just be the most misunderstood and one of the most underrated footballers on the planet, so it seemed like a good idea to do a video about him. Before we get started, just a quick reminder, since a lot of you have said you're not being made aware that we've made an upload. I believe this is a pretty site-wide issue on YouTube at the moment, and the only way to really counteract it as far as I can tell is to not only subscribe to the channel, but also to hit the bell symbol, which will let you know when we've uploaded a video. As always, you don't have to watch it, but at least that way you'll know when we've put something up. Right, away we go. When most people think of Roy Keane, I suspect the first thing that comes to mind is his arguments in the tunnel with Patrick Vieira, his shocking tackle on Erling Haaland, or his grumbling and unflattering assessments of players and teams as a pundit on ITV Sport. You may notice then that none of those things have anything to do with his ability as a footballer. That is the great tragedy when it comes to Roy Keane. Gary Neville recently said of his former captain that he was the best player on the pitch most weeks, and that wasn't mere hyperbole. I'm sure none of you need reminding, but I will do anyway for emphasis, of the fact that Paul Scholes and Ryan Giggs were in the Manchester United team for the entire time that Gary Neville was, along with the likes of Cristiano Ronaldo, Wayne Rooney, Eric Cantona, Peter Schmeichel, and more at various other times. Current United boss Ole Gunnar Solskjaer called Keane the best player he'd ever played with, bar none. Not the best captain, the best leader, the best trainer, the best at kicking people, or the best at frightening opponents in the tunnel. The best player. Full stop. Back in 2006, Sir Alex Ferguson said Keane was the best player he'd had at Manchester United, describing him as the driving force in the team for 10 years. Their relationship has since become even more fractured than it was then, and in Ferguson's last book, he said he'd only ever worked with 4 world-class players: Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Eric Cantona, and Cristiano Ronaldo. That statement is patently absurd off the bat, as is Keane's own claim that Brian Clough was the best manager he played under. But it's significant that when untainted by bitterness or resentment, Ferguson ranked Keane ahead of any other player to have played under him. As a box-to-box midfielder, Keane was a fantastic all-rounder. He had brilliant natural positioning and a tireless engine, but it's his technique that is most often overlooked. Wayne Rooney called Keane the best passer of a ball he has ever played alongside, drawing particular attention to the speed with which Keane would look to get the ball into forward areas. Keane wasn't a showman. He was far more concerned with results than stepovers, but this shouldn't be mistaken for a lack of technical ability. We often say that the mark of a truly great footballer is how few touches they require. A player who can do in 2 touches what most take 3 or 4 to do is invaluable to a team, because those split seconds can completely alter the dimensions of a game. It is that ability that made and makes players like Zinedine Zidane and Sergio Busquets so special, and Roy Keane had it in abundance. There is a common misconception that Keane was just a midfield enforcer who would then relay possession up to a Giggs or a Scholes with simple sideways passes. This couldn't really be any further from the truth. In the late 1990s in particular, when United played such a quick and incisive counter-attacking style, Keane was their most important player. His accurate and penetrative balls into the likes of Cole, York, and Solskjaer was such a potent weapon, as was his willingness to break lines with his purposeful forward runs. In his most prolific season, he even chipped in with 12 goals himself. Following a hip operation in 2002, Keane dropped a little deeper. The runs in behind became less frequent, but the passing remained purposeful and precise. His willingness to do a lot of the dirty work and sit in afforded Paul Scholes a crucial degree of freedom in the United midfield, with Scholes hitting as many as 20 goals in a single season, before retreating into a deeper role himself as the years went on. While Rooney called Keane the best passer that he played with, Darren Fletcher said he had the best first touch. Once again, Fletcher is a man who played alongside the likes of Scholes, Van Nistelrooy, Van Persie, and Berbatov at Old Trafford, so there was no lack of choice in the first touch department. Keane was fantastic at retaining possession though, even when he was surrounded or trying to escape from the tightest of situations. United players felt as though they could feed him the ball under any circumstances and he wouldn't surrender possession. Keane made the PFA Team of the Year 5 times, as well as the PFA Team of the Century. Having been named as Nottingham Forest Player of the Year in his final season with the club, he was named as Manchester United's Player of the Year in 1999 and in 2000. He was also named as the FWA and PFA Players Player of the Year in 2000. It should be obvious just from a glance at those accolades that Roy Keane was so much more than a hard man, yet this image has stuck with him since his retirement more than a decade ago. One can hardly blame those too young to have witnessed Keane in his pomp. The narrative has become so simplistic and caricatured that it is easy to buy into the myth, but those who watch Keane ought to have longer memories. Not long ago, we did a video on the 7 greatest individual performances of all time, which Keane topped ahead of the likes of Maradona, Pele and Messi. That performance was the second leg of the 1999 Champions League semi-final against Juventus, and I stand by my decision. That day, Keane faced a midfield trio of Zidane, Davids and Deschamps, and barely gave them a sniff all night. Having scored the opening goal of the game, despite picking up a yellow card which would rule him out of the final, Keane spent the evening epitomising why he was arguably the best and certainly the most effective midfielder in the world at that time. Now, some of you in the comments might point out facts such as Keane picking up 11 red cards during his Manchester United career, the fact that his tackle on Erling Haaland was shameful, and that he is rather amusingly scathing in his punditry these days. And all of these things are true. Keane was a born leader and one of the finest captains in the sport's history. He did treat every training session like a cup final. If he felt anyone was off their game, he'd be the first to let them know. He did have famous battles with Patrick Vieira, and he certainly wasn't one to shirk a challenge. None of that is up for debate. The point though is that that wasn't all he was. Roy Keane should never be mentioned in the same breath as Vinnie Jones or Neil Ruddock, but rather alongside the likes of Graham Souness and Dave Mackay. Imagine Maradona only being known for the cocaine and that handball, Eric Cantona just being remembered for kung fu kicking a Crystal Palace fan, or Cristiano Ronaldo being thought of merely as that young winger who winked to the Portugal bench after Wayne Rooney was sent off. All of these things are true, but they are not the events which truly tell the tale of the player in question, and nor is the idea that Roy Keane was a limited but effective bruise. There are few players in the history of the game you'd rather have in your dressing room, and equally few you'd fear as much if the opposition had them in theirs. Keane is quite possibly the most influential player of the Premier League era, and without doubt one of the best. There have been a whole raft of ultimate, all-time, and greatest Premier League 11s in recent years, and an embarrassing lack of Roy Keane in almost all of them. Here is BBC Sports, chosen by Danny Murphy, Ian Wright, Gary Lineker, and Alan Shearer. Here is The Guardian's, with the slightly unusual inclusion of unfortunate Liverpool fullback Rob Jones. Here is the Sky Sports selection, as chosen by Matthew Letizia, Paul Merson, Phil Thompson, and Charlie Nicholas. Here is Graham Souness' selection in The Times last year, which featured a couple of current Man City midfielders. Here is a TalkSport Listeners 11, which appears to have just one centre-back, and Alan Shearer as a left winger. Here is Tony Gales for Sky Sports. We could go on, but you get the gist. Of course, there have been many great central midfielders during the Premier League era, but whilst the argument is so often between Gerrard, Lampard, and Scholes, the truth is, Keane was more influential than all three. In fact, he's probably the most important player since the Premier League's inception in 1992, and it ought to be a question of who partners him in any such selection. One of the only greatest Premier League 11s I've seen that does include Keane is that of Brendan Rodgers, which is a pretty good effort I'd say, and somewhat amusingly, features no Steven Gerrard, or any Liverpool players for that matter. For the record, this would be my 11.
This is a Chucky Beat production.
As a bit of fun, feel free to leave your own ultimate Premier League 11s in the comments. I mean, mine is obviously bang on, and any variation means you know absolutely nothing about football, but it's a bit of fun nonetheless. Lastly, it was my birthday on Wednesday, which is when this video was originally going to be uploaded, and all I asked for were 875,000 new subscribers and a new car. I'm yet to receive either, so any help on either of those fronts is much appreciated. Cars can be quite pricey in fairness, so I'll settle for a subscription and a quick click of the notification bell from almost a million of you. Come on, don't let me down. So that's it for our Not Actually a 7. Thanks for watching, give us a like if you enjoyed the video, and don't forget to subscribe to HITC Sevens. You can also follow us on Twitter at HITC Sevens.